Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's workshop, Writing a Methodology section in Quantitative Research. My name is Andrea Josiah, and I will be your moderator for this afternoon. Firstly, we just want to thank everybody for availing themselves and supporting the RCD unit. We really do appreciate it. I would like to notify you that the session is recorded, so that you know. Um, More importantly, I would like to thank Dr. Berry for his effort in preparing and giving this presentation. Before I introduce our presenter, I would like to go over some housekeeping rules. So, if you have any questions during the presentation, kindly raise your virtual hand. I will enable your mic, and thereafter you can ask your question. However, if you're feeling a little shy, you can always type your question in the chat box. I will then alert the presenter and he will answer the question. It is at this point that I will pause to ask Dr. Berry, would you prefer a more interactive session or do you want the questions at the end of the session?
I think it's a relatively very small number of participants, so we can make it very interactive.
Okay, perfect. All right. So our second thing to take note of is that this session um, is recorded and the presentation slides will be requested from the facilitator. Both the recording and the slides will be uploaded onto Moodle and also onto RCDMS. And finally, the feedback survey for this workshop will be posted on the chat during the workshop. And this is basically because we would like to understand if this workshop was helpful and how we can improve in the future. It also gives you an opportunity to thank the presenter and offer a few kind words. And more importantly, by filling out the survey, this ensures that you have a certificate of attendance. So I would like to just touch on the RCD management system. I'm sure many of you here may have already heard of it, but for those that haven't, the RCDMS is here to streamline your research journey. And how you can access this is you log on via Ulink, you navigate and click on the Services tab and navigate and click on the RCDMS tab. So, two things to note when you are registering. Please use your UJ email address to register. That will enable you to register for workshops and trainings. If you use a Gmail or Yahoo, you will be unable to register for all of the offerings by RCD. And secondly, have a soft copy of your proof of registration because that's one of the things that is required when registering. I'm now going to be introducing our speaker, um, Dr. Berry. Dr. Berry is an economist at the Triple Helix Foundation. He holds a PhD in economics from the Northwest University. His research focuses on entrepreneurship, education policy, and globalization, with publications in African Development Review, African Development Mag, Global Business and Economics Review, International Journal of Educational Management, and the South African Journal of Economic and Management Sciences. His work addresses key development challenges at the intersection of policy, business, and education, aiming to advance sustainable development goals. He also consults for NGOs, which bridge research and practical impact. Without further ado, I would like to hand over to our facilitator, Dr. Berry.
Thank you very much for the brief introduction. I don't know whether we could run a brief survey of the specific disciplines of our participants. Can you do that? Is it possible?
Yes, yes, participants, you
So,
can. Mhm.
yeah, if it were possible, I will be talking while you do that. Then the participant will just quickly indicate their fields. I don't know whether they are. mainly economic students, social science students, science students, just a brief idea of where they come from so we know how much detail to emphasize when we are discussing specific issues.
Okay.
Yeah.
Participants or attendees, you can pop your answer in the chat, and then I can indicate to the presenter your discipline.
So thank you very much once again for joining us today. My name is Parfait Berry, as already introduced. I am also joining you from Cameroon, where I live and where I work. I'm going to be a presenter this morning, and I'm hoping we're going to have a more interactive discussion since the number is quite few. Small class sizes have relative advantages, so I hope we can be able to share a lot this afternoon and get to learn from each other. So I'm just going to go ahead and share my slide.
Okay.
Uh, Slide, where is it? So today we are going to be talking about how to write a solid methodology section in quantitative research. I believe most of the participants here are masters and PhD students or maybe early career researchers, maybe a few policymakers. I don't know. Maybe we could also include that. Um,
Yes, Dr. Berry. There are some answers in the chat coming through. There's a master's in public management, governance, and public policy. Arabia is a master's in human anatomy. Subeko says he's doing an honors in communication and media. There's an honors in civil engineering. Nozipo is a master's of applied data science. Class is a master's in business management, College of Business and Economics.
Okay, thank you very much. We have students from the natural sciences, engineering, social sciences, and business, from what I could pick. My domain is economics. That's where I come from. So we are going to have discussions. Research is research. So sometimes there are little changes here and there, but generally it follows a similar pattern across the board. So for those who are from the natural sciences, from engineering, I had someone from engineering. If there is something that I cannot address, then probably we can make time for a more private discussion. Thank you very much. So, um, I, can you see my presentation?
Yes, I can.
Okay, thank you very much. This is the general layout of the whole research process, what everything you need to know to do about your research. There are three critical questions when you want to start research. The so-called what, why, and how. And we can also add so what and a few others like who, when, and where. Today, we will mainly be talking about how, which is always discussed in the methodology. Regarding what, before you answer the question of how, you must have thought of something. What is that thing? What is the study about? And you must have written the introduction. Some of you probably you are still at the level of the proposal. You are still reflecting on whether the idea you have is actually researchable or not. You are at that level of what, and your supervisor or advisor should be able to assist you in coming out with the what section in a way that it will be researchable. Regarding why is it important? Immediately you come out with this with the what. You are certain about what you want to do. You are certain about the problem. You're certain about the questions that you intend to answer. The, the next thing is, why is it important? What is the rationale? What are the significance of that study? And usually you need to address this in the introduction, but the literature often helps you a lot to be able to come out with a very good explanation of why what you want to do is very important. And now, regarding what we'll be discussing today, we'll focus on how. The issue here is how did you do what you had in mind, which is the methodology. And you need to be able to explain this with sufficient detail such that a naive reader can be able to replicate it in your absence. So we will discuss it in greater detail. But you remember that for everything you do in research, there is always the question of so what? What are the implications of the study? This will be discussed by some other presenters, not me. So there are other crucial questions. So once you are able to answer these questions, one, what, why, how, so what, who, when, and where did you do the study? When did you do the study? Who were the people involved in the study? Just know that once you have a solid grasp of how to answer these questions, just know that the the challenges that students often face with their supervisors has been minimized for you. So you need to be able to learn how to approach the what, the why, the how, the so what, and the who, when, and where thoroughly. Sufficient details. More is better than less. Why is it not going?
Um, I'm not
I'm
too
trying
sure.
to I'm trying to take to the next slide. Okay.
Oh, there we go. There
So
we go.
yeah, okay, there we go. So what is the method section all about? How long it's for 2 hours, right?
Yes.
Yes.
However,
Okay.
it does include questions.
Sure, I understand. Sure. So the method chapter is that section where you have to document all the steps that you followed or you are going to follow, depending on whether you are still at the level of the proposal or whether you are already in the writing phase of the of your dissertation. So you have it is in the method section that you have to stand out. This is where you speak as an authority. This is where you come out authoritatively. In the introduction, you probably had identified a problem and you use other people's studies your to support your problem. So it's still a little part of the literature review. In the literature review section, which is typically chapter 2 or the second chapter in your work, you have simply dwelled on other people's ideas. You've looked at theories, you've looked at the different concepts, how they have been contextualized and how they've been conceptualized. You've looked at the empirical literature. Those are other people's studies. That's not your study. It is in the literature it is in the method section that you start speaking, that we start listening to you. You now start speaking like an authority because at this stage, you want to come out as unique, as novel as possible. So this is that section where you have to document every step that you are going to take or that you took to realize the study. And remember, you have to do it in a way that some other person can replicate the phases you have explained, even in your absence, and arrive at similar result that you obtain. So typically it contains a description of the subject or the participant or the unit of analysis. For those who are in the biological sciences, typically you should be familiar with terms like subjects and participants. For those who are in the social sciences, okay, you should be familiar with participants, unit of analysis, especially for economists. So it also always contain the instruments and how those instruments were measured, the procedures, the data analysis, uh, and and the data analysis. So the method section will provide you with information by which a study's validity and credibility can be judged. So typically, it will require you to provide a very clear description of how the experiment was conducted. Why was it conducted? That is the rationale for why the specific experimental procedure was chosen. And you also are expected to provide sufficient details such that it can be repeated by others to evaluate reproducibility, and the audience can judge. Typically, the audience here would be the reader for graduate students, can judge whether the results are conclusions, the results and the conclusions are valid. So when writing this section, who are the people? Who is the targeted audience? You should have this audience in your mind. Is it my supervisor? Is it my examiner? Is it my is it the jury that is going to examine the thesis? You need to have these people in your mind, and you ask yourself, what do they expect? Have I provided it with sufficient details that they won't raise any questions? So part of the graduate program is to help you to be able to self-critique. So as you are writing, you should be self-critiquing yourself such that by the time you submit something, you are sure that you've covered most of the loopholes that could probably be raised by the reader. So you need to provide what was done, how was it done, what justifies the design that you use, and how were the results analyzed. These are some of the questions that are typically addressed in the section. So how do you begin the method chapter? One of the most reasonable ways to begin a method chapter is to provide a detailed introductory paragraph, because once you provide a detailed introductory paragraph, it not only guides the reader on what to expect, but it also guides you, the writer. It provides you with a solid framework within which you can incorporate the materials. And by the time you've written the introduction, you should be able to look at the introduction and ask yourself, is this introduction sufficient to cover everything that is expected of me at this level? Once you are able to answer this, and the introduction usually should not be a very long introduction. It's just a summary of the things that you plan to write. And I take an example of an introduction. Take, for instance, we want to do a study on the determinants of mathematics achievement among secondary school students in South Africa. This is a topic that a student could conceptualize, could come up with for a master's, for an honors degree, or for a master's degree, or even at the doctoral level, a student can come up with such a problem. Especially now, we are talking about the learning crisis where standards are falling, students are not performing well, basic, mathematics and literacy skill. Come up with a topic like this. And the question now is, in order for this person to ensure that what is going is, enough and convincing, you come out with a brief introduction that's going to include. For instance, this study employed a quantitative of mathematics achievement in South Africa, first focusing on student level factors, and the person identifies the variables. Those student level factors, I'm going to look at motivation, and school level factors. I'm going to look at example, teacher qualifications, ICT resources, class size, textbooks availability. This introduction, it's trying to list those things that I am going to be discussing. Section outlines the research design, the population and sampling, data collection methods, data analysis, techniques, and ethical considerations to ensure transparency and replicability. Now, once your thesis advisor reads this introduction, he already has an initial idea of where this candidate is going. The candidate has indicated that he is going to include a research design, a population and sampling, a data collection technique, and you can now be able to of the structure of your structure, because based on his remember, your supervisor is what you are doing, but your supervisor has experience in the field such that it can enable your supervisor to evaluate what you are writing, even if he is and say, okay, probably you are missing something. He can now tell you, okay, also include this, also include it. This is one very encouraging your supervisor or the reader to read the work, because if he looks at it and discover that you have only talked about data collection and data, he doesn't have enough motivation, because he knows that if you are only talking about data collection and data analysis, what about the sample? He already has it in his mind. Something is missing from somewhere. So you need to be able to provide a brief introduction, which will help the reader to follow up your work and also help you to be able to write, logically, coherently. Yeah. So next, why the method section? So the method section, it's very, very important. A roadmap, which, it ensures clarity, replicability, credibility. And you need to learn to write the method section that satisfies your thesis advisor, the reviewers. Have the audience in mind. Who am I writing to? If I'm writing for a journal article, what do they expect? Maybe you've gone through the journal expectations. What do my readers expect? What does my supervisor expect? That's the most important, because that's the gate. He's like a gatekeeper. Unless he validates it, you won't proceed. What does the thesis examiner or reviewers expect? You must have discussed these kinds of issues with your supervisor and know what do reviewers
Sorry.
typically expect. Yes.
Sorry, Dr. Berry. I see that we have a hand up.
Yeah.
Petolo, you can unmute and ask if you have a question. Okay. All right. Also, Dr. Berry, Michael says that the
Okay.
line is breaking. Oh,
Really?
yeah. And
Hello.
Petolo, yes, Petolo, you can go ahead.
Yeah, actually, my question was on the previous slide. I wanted maybe an example on how to justify, for example, for a quantitative study to say, I'm choosing this method because I'm struggling
Get the
to.
question well?
On the previous slide, you spoke about, I think the last bulletin, you said we have to specify or actually justify why a quantitative approach is the one that is suitable for the study. So I was asking for an example of, for example, how to justify, given the example that you have shown on your slide.
Okay. Let me just go back. Determinants of mathematics achievement in among there was a typo there, among secondary school students in South Africa. Thank you very much for the question to begin with. Any research topic can be realized via the quantitative channel or via the qualitative channel. This specific study like this, you can decide to use a qualitative method to maybe interviews teachers, talk to a few teachers and find out why is it that mathematics performance is declining. You can now have it from a teacher's perspective, but you can also decide to quantify the data, which means you. So the choice of whether to use a quantitative approach or a qualitative approach depends on the candidate, and it also to a very large extent depends on data availability. The question is, do you have data, readily available data to conduct this study? If the data is available, that is enough justification for you to rely on the quantitative, for you to follow the quantitative approach. You feel that you
Okay.
can also collect your own quantitative data, then you can follow that path. So in any case, it just depends on data availability and availability of resources as well. Maybe if you have enough, if you don't have enough resources and you feel this study, I could quickly realize this study by just interviewing a few secondary school teachers, why not pursue that route? Just provide us with a suitable justification. It could be financial resources, it could be difficulties in accessing quantitative data, or availability of quantitative data, or any other reason. These are some of the reasons.
Okay, thanks.
Is that okay?
Yes, yes, thank you.
Okay. Is there any other question, please?
Not at the moment. Can
Remember, a very, very small number of participants, so you can interject at any time and we'll have an engaging conversation, because you can take advantage of the small, class size, so we can even engage in your own study. If you have a particular area where you are struggling with, we can engage in. So as a graduate student, you should be able to providing a clear method will prevent common pitfalls like students providing something that is vague, early rejection, supervisor keeps writing comments that you do not understand just because he feels that, he feels that you are wasting his time, and the legal environment doesn't allow him to be harsh. So he just writes anything that he feels like he should write so as to communicate to you that you are not doing the right thing. So you have to learn how to, to draft it very well. And if you are a policymaker, you need to also understand the importance of providing, a very clear. You need to understand that uh, that robust methods underpin trustworthy evidence for decision making. If you are already working in a policy environment and you are conducting a research that the stakeholders, the politicians will rely on to take decisions, you need to be sure that you provide the most accurate method section such that once decisions are taken, we are sure of a likelihood of achieving what we intended to achieve. So there are different styles. There are different there are different ways that the method section could be organized. But one of the most popular is what we call the American Psychological Association. Many other people talk about of the American Psychological Association APA style only in terms of references, but they also provide a step-by-step process on how to conduct the research from from the introduction right to the producing the appendix, everything that has to do with research. There are other styles. We have Chicago, MLA. For most students who are from the social sciences, they typically use the American Psychological Association, in which the method section is often structured into the research design, uh, the population of the study, the sampling, the data collection methods and tools, the analytical techniques, and the ethical consideration. And while writing this section, remember that replication should be the core. You should write it in a way that can replicate your study in your absence. And you must avoid common mistakes like being too vague, omitting justifications. For every statement you write in the method section, ask yourself, does this require further justification? Does that justification have to be empirical, or does it have to be out of my intuition? Or you also have to avoid misunderstanding key terms. Random sampling is very typical, very common for students to write. We use a random sampling technique, but when you ask how they use the random sampling technique, they are unable to explain. And when it is clearly evident that the random sampling technique was to be careful with the key terms. So the different components of the research design. Now, there are different types of research design, depending on where you come from, depending on your field. We have you know, most students in anthropology, they are likely going to be doing a systematic review, bibliometric reviews. We have experimental studies. Economists are increasingly doing experimental studies, but this is typical of experimental studies, observational studies such as observational designs, such as the surveys, the case study. So you must be able to link the chosen design to your research question. Well, if you identify an experimental research design as the choice that you have taken for your specific study, you must be able to explain how does it answer my research question about research design. So we are not going to go into the details about this. But what you need to know is there are so many research designs out there. And don't go around identifying, don't start your study by telling the supervisor that there are different types of research design. These include experimental design, quasi-experimental design, observational design. Then you go along explaining what all of these are. No, don't do that. What you need to ask yourself before you start writing your research design is, what research design is unique, is relevant for my study? That is the discussed in this section. If you are using a quasi-experimental study, if you are using a quasi-experimental design, you just need to go straight into that quasi-experimental design, briefly explain to your supervisor what it is, and then you justify how it fits into your study. So after writing the research design, which I believe most of you can explore many resources to understand the different kinds of design, you will not need to discuss your population and sampling. This is also very, very important. But I must inform you that research design typically looks like one of the most difficult areas for graduate students to overcome. So you need to prepare yourself ahead of time that I'm going to spend quite some time under the research design, because it can be confusing, especially for a student who is still starting, for a young researcher who is still starting learning how to do a research. You need to learn all research. What is an experimental research? You need to learn it. Does it fit into my study? Then you reject it. Then you learn about the quasi-experimental research design. Then you realize, no, this is how my study is going to unfold. The quasi-experimental research design is probably not good enough for me. Then you reject it. Then you go other and you look again. The survey research design, longitudinal research design. There are different kinds of the research design. This is something that it's going to take you a while, but it's going to pay off at the end of the day. Yes. And once you master how to navigate this this section, of course, the remaining part still remains part of you, because now we're talking about the population and sampling. What population, what is the population of your study? Are you dealing with animals? Are you dealing with human participants? Are you dealing with, you know, uh, if you are studying, I heard someone talk about business. Maybe you want to do about quality assurance. It means that these are the different kinds of population of study. Are you dealing with a population of students in Limpopo? Are you dealing with a population of students in Northwest? This is your population, that geographic area, that unit of analysis that constitute your population. It is from that population that you are going to select the sample. Yes. And once you identify the population, you need to link it to your problem. You need to link this population to your problem and to your research questions. Why have you decided that it is this particular population or this particular group of people or this particular group of animals or this particular group of whatever that you have decided to include in your analysis? Now, after choosing the population and providing sufficient justification of your population, for instance, all college students in Northwest or in Gauteng or any other province, Cape or Eastern Cape, you now need to choose a sample from which you are going to make inferences. You choose 200 students from 2 universities. Of course, this is not, you choose 200 students from each university. But a reader, your supervisor, is not just interested in the number of students that you choose for their study. He is more interested in how were the 200 students recruited for this particular study. For each of the students that was selected, what was the criteria for rejecting another student? So that is where the sampling it gets complicated, but also very interesting, because it enables you to be able to write logically how you arrive at every person. I selected A and rejected B. Why did you select A? Why did you reject B? What is it in A that made it, you know, that made the A to fulfill the inclusion criteria? And what is it in B that made him or her to fulfill the exclusion criteria? It is in this particular, you need to be able to describe your sample very well. So sampling 100 teachers for an education study using stratified sampling. You see, when you talk of stratified sampling, it means that you have identified a particular population and you have divided them into particular strata. Is it stratum or strata? I don't know. It's English. So you've split them now into different strata. But from each of the stratum, how do you select someone to add? Yes. So common sampling, there are two common sampling procedures. We have what we call the probability sampling technique, where each of the participants has an equal probability of being included or excluded from the study. And then we have the non-probability examples of this probability sampling. The most common, we have the simple random sampling technique, systematic sampling technique, stratified sampling techniques, clusters. You divide your population into different clusters. And then we also have the non-probability sampling technique, which is most often the most feasible sampling technique. But you must use a suitable strategy to convince someone that of all the probability sampling technique, because researchers are more interested in minimization of error. How do we minimize the error? If a probability sampling technique is not feasible in your study, you will have to resort to a non-probability sampling technique. And there are some samples, convenience sampling, where you choose someone because you feel that the person can better provide you with the information you need for that particular study. Then we have purposive sampling, the person can, provide you with that in snowball sampling. Snowball sampling is another very interesting sampling because, you know, you identify someone that can provide you with some information, and then the person helps you to identify a similar person who can provide you with that information. There are so many different types of sampling techniques, but for your kind of study, it depends. It depends on you. You need to study this deeply, and you need to understand each of the sampling technique so that once you are discussing the sampling, you will not come and be telling your supervisor that there is a probability sampling technique and non-probability sampling technique. Under the probability sampling technique, we have this. Under the non-probability sampling technique, there are this. Then you go ahead and explain all of them. No, you have to take time, read all of these sampling techniques, and ask yourself which of the sampling techniques best fits very well in my study. Once you have arrived at the decision about which one fits better, you can now go ahead to expatiate on it and now explain the processes that you use to arrive at your sample. Now, once you're done with sampling, which is always a very which is always a very, very important step, you need to explain your data collection methods and instruments. How do you plan to collect data for this particular study? Are you going to use a survey? Are you going to use interviews? Are you going to collect some secondary data that is already somewhere, maybe from the National Treasury, from the Department of Health, or whatever department? There are so many repositories. Maybe an institutional repository. Maybe the University of Johannesburg does provide that repository where some data set is collected and stored for researchers to use in future. You have to explore, and usually other studies will help you a lot because the more you read, the more you identify. You read similar studies, you look at how they collected the data, how the instrument they use in collecting the data, and then you try to identify patterns. Most studies are using but this kind of data. Then there must be something about the data that I can use in my own study. So you have to provide a details about your data sources, questionnaires, existing data set, and tools. And you may want to use validated skills. And I always advise students that are planning to use surveys, questionnaires. It's not advisable for an honors or master's student to design his or her own questionnaire. It's best to use a validated scale, a questionnaire that has already been used. And if you read the literature very well, you will always see those questionnaires. If you read your other studies very well, you will always see those surveys. Because as a young researcher, as someone who is still learning how to become a good researcher, you need to be able to compare what you have done with what other people have done. So if you use, a validated questionnaire, a standardized questionnaire, it will be easier for you to compare the internal and external validity with those of other studies. So once you have documented the data collection processes, your study could be a secondary study. When I talk of secondary study here, I mean that you will be using data that has been collected and stored somewhere by another person. And if it's a primary study, it means you want to go to the field and collect your own data, which makes you an authority over your data. Yes, but you must be able to follow the processes that are required. So normally once you are done with providing details, you need to be able to check things like reliability, validity, and there is a lot of them. But such that we cannot be able to document them within this short presentation. But you need to understand that it's a step-by-step process, such that the method section will be as coherent as possible. For everything you write, it's justified. Now, you also have to validate your, there are so many, I've already talked about validating the research instrument. And if you are using, like for some of us in economics, most often we use secondary data, which means we collect data from the World Bank, from the IMF, or from national repositories like the National Institute of Statistics or the National Treasuries. The first question is, how does theory link to the data? You need to be able to provide a theoretical justification, or you must have provided theoretical justification in the literature review. Remember, a mistake that students always make is bringing a lot of literature into the method section. It is not right. If there is much literature that needs to be discussed, send it to the right place. So if you already have a good theoretical justification, that can serve as a validation technique for the variables you are using, for the choice of the variables you are using, and for your analytical tools. So you also need to explain how you collected the data. Was it an online survey? Did you administer it yourself? Went to the field, gave it to the participant. You need to be able to explain this. And what was the nature of the data that you received after administering this questionnaire? If you administered 100 questionnaires to students, did you get all the 100? And if you did not get all the 100, why did you not receive all the 100? And if you received all the 100, were all the 100 questionnaires properly filled the way you expected? And if they were not properly filled the way you expected, what was wrong with those that were not properly filled? Because this thing is interconnected, such that you have to explain everything, the dynamics. You have to explain everything here and there. So the idea is you must be able to minimize the issue of, you have to minimize missing data. If at the end of the day, 50 questionnaires came back and 3 of the questionnaires were not properly filled, did you consider them in the analysis? And if you consider them in the analysis, what could be a potential problem from considering them in the analysis? You see, it's a two-way street. You do this, you look at the pitfalls. You do that, you look at the merits and the demerits. You have to explain all of this. What period did you collect the data? Did you collect the data over a period of 3 weeks, 7 weeks, 3 months? Because it is very important. If you collect the data over a period of, say, 1 year, there is no certainty that the information that person A provided in January will be the same information that the same person will provide in December. So you have to try to minimize the data collection period as much as possible. Once you minimize the data collection period, but also giving yourself enough time to be able to collect enough data for the analysis. The larger the sample size, the better. That's the rule. The larger the sample size, the better. And I did not talk about this, but there are different ways of calculating a suitable sample size. But you will discover this as you are studying. These are not these are not, these are not very complex issues. There are different ways of calculating a suitable sample size for your study, but you need to be able to provide an appropriate justification. If your study covered the period 1990 to 2020, for instance, for those who are doing a secondary analysis, why did you not go right to 1980? If your study covered the period 1994, when South Africa transitioned to 2025, why didn't you go backward to 1970, to the 1970s? You see, the fact that there was a transition in 1994 in South Africa already provides you with enough basis and justification why you think that the study should start but in 1994 and not 1970, when it was a completely different kind of regime, because there was a regime switch in 1994. So for everything you do, you must be able to provide a justification, in essence. Now, the data analysis section is one of the most important, especially for economists and every other field. How you analyze your data is very crucial, because this is where we talk about the causal. I can see that somebody's hand is up.
Yes, you can go ahead, you can unmute.
Okay. My question is on the previous slide. I see that most of the items on the list gravitate towards the qualitative. I just want to know where to draw the line when it comes to secondary data. Do we have to explain how they handle the missing data, and yeah, and so on and so forth?
When you talk of qualitative data, because I feel like maybe you need to read a bit about qualitative data, because the previous slides we've been talking about questionnaires. Questionnaires are not necessarily qualitative in nature. There are different types of questionnaires. We have open-ended questionnaires, we have closed-ended questionnaires, but you can also do a quantitative study using a questionnaire. Are you there?
Yes,
Hello?
yes, I mean,
Yes, you can. It's possible for you to do a quantitative study. Must not only be done when you collect, you know, uh, secondary data like for inflation in South Africa over 1990 to 2005. You cannot limit a secondary study to that. If you collect data on inpatients in a particular hospital, that the data was not originally collected by you. Maybe the data was collected by hospital staffs and whatever, and then they have made it available for you for the analysis. That is secondary data. You cannot claim credit over that data collection. When we talk of that is primary data, it means that you go to the field yourself. So your question is about quantitative and qualitative. And my previous slide, I've mentioned about 5-point questionnaires and the others. When I talk about questionnaires in this specific context, I'm referring to quantitative data that is being collected through questionnaires. You can collect quantitative data using questionnaires. I don't know whether it addresses your concern.
no, basically,
Does it
okay,
address your concern?
let me give you maybe a bit of context. I'm working on the
Yes.
unemployment data. I'm working on factors of long-term unemployment among women in South Africa from a machine
Yes.
learning perspective. So
Yes.
already Statistics South Africa has collected the data is there and everything. So I wanted to know,
Yes.
like, in explaining the data and how the data was collected, where do I draw the line? Do I explain everything that you have explained on this slide, or there's some of the things that I cannot be able to explain with regard
Okay.
to secondary data? Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. Secondary data on is it female labor unemployment in South Africa?
Yeah, female
Did you say female
long-term
labor?
unemployment.
Long-term unemployment? And it happens
Yeah.
that I'm also working on a similar issue on South Africa, but we're looking at entrepreneurship. Yes, but we're looking at unemployment, entrepreneurship in South Africa. So your study, let's start from from the from the from the research design. You are likely going to use a quasi-experimental research design, but you need to go and find out why a quasi-experimental research design is better, because it's going to be more of a retrospective study, right? This is
Yes.
going to be a retrospective study because you're looking at what has already happened, which means you have no influence over what happened,
Yes.
right? Are we there? Yes. So you're going to look at what has already happened, perhaps over 1994 to the present moment. You are going to track it based on existing data, what Statistics South Africa has provided to you. Second, we are going to look at the population of the study. Now, the population of the study here will depend on whether on the kind of data you will be using from Statistics South Africa. And is it going to cover are you going to streamline your data across provinces, or you are going to use more aggregate data for South Africa as a whole? Because your population is already South Africa, right? But you need to describe details about that population. Is it a survey? The kind of data you are using, is it a survey?
Yes, it's a quarterly labor force survey
Quarterly
conducted by
quarterly labor quarterly labor force
labor
survey,
force
which I
survey.
believe, yes, which I believe started somewhere around 2000, right?
Yeah, around 2008.
Yes,
But there's an
around,
LFS
yeah,
that
which,
started in 2001. Yeah.
yes. So you need to be able to develop to explain the population. Now, are you going to analyze the data at provincial level or at the national level?
It's at the national level. It's aggregated.
You see, we are looking at the population of the study, right? We're still at the population of the study.
Hmm?
Yes. So it's now that's how you describe your population of the study. From the population of the study, you have mentioned that now it's a secondary study. Now you've mentioned that you from the population, you what now a sample. I want to look at how you define your sample in this particular context. Are you
I'm
using
not
any
quite
sample?
Yes, but I'm not quite sure of the exact number. But I'll be working with women.
Okay.
I've identified women between the ages of 15 to 64.
Now that's your sample between women age 15 to 64, right?
Yes.
Over 2008 to 2025. That is the time period.
Okay, the time
You
period I
understand?
had chosen 2023, but yeah, it's fine.
Okay, 2023 based on data availability, because you don't just say 2023. Why this period?
Yes,
Because for everything you are going to be writing, right, you need to be providing sufficient justification about it. You now say that everything we've been explaining there also fits well into your own kind of study,
yes.
right? Yes, it fits very well into your kind of study. And now we are going to, after choosing, because you have already explained your data collection. I've collected this data from Statistics South Africa. The data contains these thousands of, okay, since you are working at the national level, you probably will be having the percentage of females who are unemployed quarterly in South Africa over this period of time. But you also need to define your other variables. Besides female labor is it female labor unemployment, which I believe may be your dependent variable, because we now need to talk about the different kinds of variables that you have in your study, right? We have the dependent
Yes,
variable, we have the independent variables, we have the co-founding variables, or the some instrumental variables, which is what we are discussing now in this slide. That is, right? You need to be able to discuss your instruments. What variables are you using in the analysis? What is your dependent variable?
it's long-term unemployment. Whether you've been unemployed over 12 months or less than 12 months.
Okay.
So it's
Yeah, that is
binary.
now. But based on theory, you already have a good justification as to why you have chosen 12 months as long-term unemployment. Why not 6 weeks? In the UK or in other countries, if you are unemployed for 6 weeks or more, it's considered long-term. You see, your context now is different because the specific characteristics of the South African economy makes it people to be unemployed for almost a year before they find a job, or probably more, right? But you have chosen 6 weeks. You have chosen a year. Is it a year?
Yes.
Yes, you've chosen 12 months. Now you need to be able to come in and explain these specifics based on your context. Now, there is a lot that you can also discuss in that data. You need to be able to identify, you've already identified the causal pathways from your theory. What are your independent variables? You must have identified the independent variables. Those are variables that make people to be unemployed in the long term.
Yes.
The causal pathways, right? You have identified a number of variables. Now, after you can identify about, because since this is an aggregate study that covers a very long period of time, there are thousands of variables that can make someone to be unemployed over a long time. Some people are just depressed. They don't want suffering from depression that they cannot explain. They don't want to go and look for jobs. Or the depression keeps them, makes them unable to go out and look for jobs. There are different variables. But you will not be able to quantify this variable, right? Because you will not be able to find data on it.
Yes.
Now, there are other variables that you can be able to find data on it. It could be that the COVID-19, it could be that it could be that growth rate in South Africa is one variable. It could be foreign direct investment, the level of foreign direct investment that South Africa attracts. It could be the level of immigration in South Africa. There are so many economic and non-economic variables. It could be the level of education, not just level of education. It could be the quality of education, right? Or it could be the skills that the people possess. But you need to be aware at before time that not all these theoretically conceived variables you will be able to have data, quantifiable data to measure them. Therefore, they are going to constitute what we call missing variables or unobservables in your modeling. You are going to classify them under unobservable, or in more formal terms, economists usually call them the error term, right?
Yes.
Yes. And now we can go further and further. We can now dissect all the causal mechanism. When I say causal mechanisms here, I'm talking about the channels through which these explanatory variables or the independent variable affect the dependent variable. The reason I did not include a slide on types of variables here is because I assume it must have been discussed in earlier discussions, maybe at the introduction, where you always have to talk about your dependent variable, independent variable. I assume that students already know this, but I hope our discussion has enlightened someone to understand what we are talking about. Because once you come out with a topic, there has to be a causal pathway, a causal mechanism. For instance, the determinants of long-term unemployment among females in South Africa, using a machine level analysis or whatever, right? Now you have identified that your problem is that there is a problem with female unemployment over the long term in South Africa. But the question is, what are the causal pathways? What are the factors that are causing females to be unemployed in South Africa over the long term? Someone has to identify this, right?
Yes.
You have to identify the different factors, the different variables that influence this unemployment. Yes. And the instrumental variables. Some effects are direct, some are indirect. You have to identify all of them, document all of them. Then you gradually start deleting based on reasons until you arrive at that small number of, we call it a parsimonious model, where you have a select few number of variables that have the most important effects or that are likely to be the most important predictors of female unemployment in South Africa, right? Yes, these are the strategies you can use to approach to analyze your study. I don't know whether this helps you.
Yeah, it helps. Thank you very much.
Yes. So where were we? We were talking about were we talking about data analysis? So I hope you now see that everything we've been discussing previously is also quantitative,
Yes.
because our focus is on quantitative analysis. But I didn't want, since I'm from an economics background, I was trying to avoid that bias towards economics. That's why I decided that, okay, most often students prefer to go to the field and collect their data, which I very much recommend, because once you are the king, once you know how to do, because it's very easy to learn how to do secondary studies, but primary studies you need a lot. So I was trying to avoid that bias. That's why you realize most of my analysis, they were coming from questionnaires, going to the field, experimental studies, maybe going to the laboratory for those who are in the natural sciences. Yes. So one of the most important part is what we call the identification strategy or data analysis. The data analysis techniques. You have to clearly explain your chosen techniques. Are you going to use descriptive statistics? Are you going to use correlation analysis? Are you going, and correlation analysis, there's also a research design called correlational research design. Are you going to use t-test? Are you going to use regression analysis? Why are you using it? Because the reader, your supervisor, is more interested in why you are doing something and not what you did. Let me say it again. Your supervisor will be more interested in why you did it, why you use a particular estimation procedure, and not the procedure itself. Yes. So the students always have this temptation of, the question is, how do you choose a method of analysis, a data analysis technique? At what level do you choose a technique of analysis? Now, this can be a very complex question because in some studies, the problem is actually the method of analysis. Let me take, for instance, ordinary least square. At some point, ordinary least square was the queen of social sciences. If you could run a regression, you were considered, the queen of social sciences just by being able to run a regression. But over time, people realized that the assumptions of ordinary least square were too stringent, such that it was very unrealistic in the social sciences for data to fulfill those assumptions. People now started coming up with new estimation techniques. That is why we have the two-stage least square, the generalized method of moment, the autoregressive distributed lag models, and many more. And then now, as data became increasingly available over countries, new methods also started coming up, whereby you could do a study not just on a particular country, but across a number of countries. That is why we now have panel studies. And then we have fixed effect method, random effect method, and different kinds of studies that you do across different areas at a particular point in time. So the question is, at what point do you choose your method of data analysis? And I'm going to expatiate this based on my experience in economics. The idea is, the temptation is, most students always choose, when students in economics, for instance, when students come up with a topic, the temptation is always for them to think about a method of data analysis. Yes, once they come up with a topic, they just jump into, I'm going to analyze my study, my data using the GMM. The GMM is a very common method in economics. I'm going to analyze it. But the question is, why do you think the GMM is the best method? Or what makes GMM a suitable method for your analysis? And if you are from the biological sciences, natural sciences, what makes ANOVA, which is most common in these fields, what makes ANOVA, t-test, a suitable method for your analysis? You cannot be saying you will use the generalized method of moment when your dependent variable is categorical, which means it has 3 options. Or when it's a dummy, it means that it's 2 options, male or female. Whereas you know that this method of analysis you are talking about requires, time series data, quantitative over time, which means that it has to be scaled data. So my question again is, at what level should a student choose a particular method of data analysis? Based on my experience and standard practice, the choice of your method of analysis should be driven by the underlying characteristics of your data. Yes. So if you conceive a study, you review the literature, the theories, you identify all the variables that are likely to have an influence on your dependent variable, the next thing you should do is explore your data. Get a feel, of your data. You already know based on analysis that I'm supposed to test for normality. Is your data normally distributed? You test for it. I'm also to explore outliers. Is my data, does my data have a lot of outliers? Are the outliers such that they can influence the outcome of my results? If they can influence the outcome of my result, then I need to address extreme values or those outliers before I do the data analysis. These are, you are following a step-by-step process that will lead you now into the best choice of analysis. But you need to know that there are some methods that allows you to estimate your models, that allows you to estimate your models with outliers. For instance, quantile regression analysis. Yes. So if your data has a lot of outliers, you need to start now you already rejected the ordinary least square because you have seen that your data has a lot of outliers. You say, okay, no, the ordinary least square is not going to provide me with the best kind of result based on the fact that my data has a lot of outliers. You reject one, you move to the next one, heteroscedasticity. This is not a very common term in the natural. I don't know whether it's common in the natural sciences or other fields, but for an economist or someone from a business background, you should understand heteroscedasticity. Does the data appear to be non-constant, or is it homogeneous? Homoscedastic, sorry. Is it homoscedastic? You test this. Now, you found out that there is heteroscedasticity. Now you have to reject other methods. You gradually reject, which means the data characteristics are helping you to gradually reject some method and reject gradually until you arrive now until you have tested all the underlying characteristics based on what theory predicts. And now you are left with now just a few methods from which you can now choose. That is how you choose your estimation technique. Don't just choose a topic and then jump into an estimation technique. No, you have to follow this. Let your choice of data analysis be driven by the underlying characteristics of your data. Yes. So, and you also have to document the software that you use. Most of these softwares, they are free. R, something like R. Many students are increasingly using R, which is an open source software. Stata is a licensed software. Most universities have the license, so you can always get it from your library. Python is also a licensed software, but a very good software. But I always advise students to learn R and Python. This is something I did not have the opportunity to learn. But these are software that will expose you a lot if you have time. And most honors and masters and PhD students have enough time to be able to learn some of these. If you have time, I advise you to learn R and Python. Stata is an excellent software for econometric analysis. So, but it's also, if you already know R and Python, it will be easier for you to use Stata. Now, after documenting these issues, you also have to take note of ethical considerations. Ethics is one of the most important things in studies that include human participants. Yes. If you conduct a study that uses animals, uh, students, human participants, you need to provide evidence that you respected all the ethical norms that are required for you to conduct such a study. And in many countries, you cannot go to the field without an ethical clearance. And most often, it's the ethical clearance is issued by an institution either within the university or it is issued by some national board that is in charge of ensuring that people don't engage in dangerous research or research that can risk the life of people. Not just even risks. What about exposing confidential information? Take, for instance, you are conducting a study on banks, and you know banks are rivals. There is a lot of competition between banks. Then you go and uncover a competitive strategy that a particular network group, maybe a company, has been using. Maybe MTN, Standard Bank, or whatever bank. And then you just go out there and you release it. That can land you in serious trouble. That is why, in order to encourage research, so that these institutions will not, feel reluctant to provide this information, you have to declare that, all their information is going to be anonymous, and you have to strictly abide by those agreements. And similarly, you need what we call, even after obtaining an ethical clearance, you need what we call a consent. You need the consent of the individuals involved. Unfortunately, with animal research, you can't get their consent. But with humans, you must get their consent. You can't force people to be part of your study. You can't go to a school and just because a teacher has given you the authority to go to class and conduct the research, then you will not go and seek the student's consent. You have to explain the study to the student. You have to inform them about how you are going to protect their confidential information, how none of their personal information is going to be disclosed. And there is a lot about ethics that you know that you have to respect. And I think I've done most of the talking, and maybe we can now look at whether we can now engage in a more in conversation. We can now engage with the participants to see whether they've been following your specific questions that you have. We can look at them.
All right.
Thank you very much for listening. I don't know how long did I take?
Like an hour and 20 minutes.
That's a lot. That's a lot.
Thank you so much, Dr. Berry, for that very insightful and comprehensive presentation. I think I speak for everybody saying that it's really helped, guide especially the quantitative research.
Yeah.
So I just want to extend our thanks, appreciation from the RCD unit. I would now like to open the floor to questions, comments, and suggestions. If you're unclear about something and you maybe want a concept or two re-explained, I think now is the time for you to either um, unmute your mic and speak, or you can pop your question in the chat box, and we will attend to it. So, guys can go ahead.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. There is a lot to write and to discuss about quantitative research, but when I was preparing this, I wanted to minimize the number of slides and talk more. I was hoping we'll have a more engaging, conversation, but now is the time. You can tell me if you don't have a question, tell me what your topic is. Tell me what challenge you are facing. Then maybe we could give you more insights. If there is something I cannot help, I will give you a rendezvous.
Okay. Anybody?
Hi, Doctor.
Hi.
This is Nozipo Mazibugo. I am doing a Master of Applied Data Science.
Thank you.
So my topic is assessing the relationship between GDP growth and unemployment in South Africa. So I'm looking at an industry analysis because most studies have looked at this relationship, but with aggregate unemployment data, the unemployment rate per aggregate.
Excuse me, Mazibu, my internet, it seems like my internet breaking. Was it breaking all along?
No, it was fine.
Because I can't, okay, because I can hear that you are talking, but it's breaking and I can't follow up what you are saying. If you're working on
Okay.
firm level data,
Yes, I'm looking at the relationship between GDP growth and unemployment in South Africa. I'm looking at the industry analysis.
yes,
So I've discovered that most topic, but they haven't gone into industry. For example, what is the industry GDP contribution, and then how does it affect
please, I'm sorry,
unem
I will keep
un
interjecting.
yes.
Oh my God, my internet. What's happening?
Dr. Berry, we can hear you. Can you hear us?
Please, uh, pl- the internet is breaking. I don't know why.
Oh, okay. Yes, I think I can hear it. Yes, there is some breaks.
Yes, I don't know. I don't know. Please, if you follow up what he's saying, you can also
Okay,
let
so
me know. But I will struggle to follow up with her.
okay,
Yes, just speak. I will no longer interject you. If I don't hear anything,
okay,
I will ask for clarity later.
all right. So my challenge is now on the topic. I got a comment that the topic is missing a data science focus, because with me I had thought that the data science focus will show when I go into the analysis, because I'm going to be looking at traditional econometrics methods to look at this relationship compared to data science relationship methods in terms of correlations like your gradient boost compared to linear regression models in econometrics. So do I have to, in my topic, then say include the machine learning, for example, say uh, assessing the relationship between GDP growth and unemployment in South Africa using machine learning? Should I specify in the topic, or it's fine if it appears in the methodology? That is what I am doing. I'm using both traditional methods and machine
Okay.
learning methods.
Okay. I'm going to give you a two-way answer. Machine learning is a relatively new area in econometric analysis.
Okay.
So many people who are suggesting topics that include machine learning recently attach it to the topic because it's fancy. It also attracts the readers. Do you understand? But
Okay.
but from a standard perspective, your topic should be simple, it should be straightforward to the point, and it should typically have about up to 15 words in it. But I advise you to include make the topic to about 15 words because
Okay. Dr. Berry, you're breaking up.
new and innovative way of analyzing current trends, because what you are doing is trendy and very interesting and captivating to most people. So
All right. Dr. Berry.
yeah, yeah.
Dr. Berry, sorry, you just broke
So
up there, but I see Dr. Gabriel, you have your hand up. You can unmute and go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Miss Andrea. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. Dr. Berry, thank you for a very wonderful presentation. I think I was following the conversations that you are having with the participants, and I think it's a wealth of information that you brought to us today, and we thank you for your expertise in this area. I just wanted to add to just to contribute to the question that was asked with another angle, besides complementing what Dr. Berry have said, in terms of, your title, including those keywords that seem, to be important and very captivating. There's also, that when you are framing your topic, right, or the title of your study, of course, it has to be linked to the topic, but there's also a concept of what is called search engine optimization. So what I'm saying is that in terms of your study, if I'm to search your study on Google, what are the chances that it will appear amongst the first few, or that appears on the first page, right? So that is what we call search engine optimization, that you have to think of when you are attaching a title to your study. So those keywords that are important, like machine learning that you're talking about, you have to capture it within your title. Those keywords that pertains to the study that you are doing, you have to capture them in your title, so that your study should not be the 1 million article on Google. All right. Because for me, when I'm searching, the chances are very slim that I even go to the third tab on Google. If it's saying that maybe there's 1 million articles, I can just maybe go the first page, second, then I stop there, right? But your study might be very relevant to what I'm looking for, but it's actually ranked very far from the ones that appear the first, because the title is lacking keywords that are important and that are pertaining to the study that you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Dr.
that was a
Gabriel.
very great point, Dr. Dr. Gabriel. That was a very good point. Yeah, you need to so that if people search for your topic, the likelihood of them landing on your topic first, even if it may not be the best written material, should be very high. That's why you see some people having higher citation than others, because they use the suitable keywords. So most people are likely to find their topic, likely to read their papers, and likely to cite their papers. But I
Yes,
think
Doctor,
this
I had
discussion
the
on
first.
Go ahead.
I was saying I had the first angle of advice that you were giving, but I didn't get to hear the second one.
Dr. Berry.
was she I was simply emphasizing that what Gabriel said is actually very, very important. You need to
Yes.
ensure that the keywords that best describe your topic appear in the topic itself.
Yes, Dr.
Yes.
Berry, I think
So
when you,
keywords,
Yes, when you first started, Doctor, you said
yes,
it's a two-way of doing this thing. So you only, I got to hear only one. So
okay.
I wanted to hear the second one.
Okay. I do not quite remember what I said, but okay, let me just say that two ways. One way was I was saying that you need to keep your topic as specific as possible. That was one thing that I said. Let your topic be specific. More it's recommended that your topic should have between 13 to 15 words.
Yes.
But there are some keywords that must be part of that topic. So your topic must also be stated in a way that it captures the keywords. And your keyword here is it GDP or unemployment and machine learning?
Yeah, it's GDP unemployment relationship using machine learning.
Yes, using
Machine
there
learning
now is
based. Yes. Yeah.
yes, machine learning there comes as a method of analysis, right?
Yes, it's a method of analysis. That's what I'm
Yes.
struggling with, Uti. Should I put it in the
Yes.
topic,
Now,
even though it's a method of analysis?
yeah, I think you should, like I recommended, I said that typically it will not be recommended for you to put machine learning, which is a method of analysis, in the topic. But
Yes.
since your area is quite novel and attracts a lot of attention from people in this contemporary, digital advances and the continued integration of machine learning into economic analysis and policy decision, I was advising you to integrate machine learning as part of the topic, because it is what is going to give it the extra flavor for people to, be interested in your topic. Yes, irrespective of whether the
Okay.
word limit exceeds 15 or not.
Oh,
Is it
okay.
clear?
But
Is it clear enough?
yes, now it's clear. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Berry. Are there any other questions?
I want to hear from an honor student. I want to hear from an honor student who is doing. Someone mentioned she was doing honors here.
Okay. Yes, there's an honors in civil engineering that I see in the chat. So the response is from the honors. Thank you, sir, for diving deep into this chapter of research. For me, I do not have any questions as yet. I still want to digest what we have gone through.
Okay, okay, thank you. What about a doctorate student? Is there any doctorate students here?
Yes, there are doctorate students. You can go ahead and unmute and ask a question.
Mm-hmm. And I will advise you to always attend these kinds of programs and encourage your friends to attend them, because you might not learn a lot, but even the one thing you hear and learn is going to be helpful. And sometimes this could be that platform that gives you, that time to relax, recuperate, listen to how other people are addressing their challenges or the challenges they are facing in their research, which you typically will not have enough time to digest it on your own. Because if you're just there in the library on your desktop working alone, you won't know, and you only have to go and face your supervisor. You need to listen to other people beside your supervisor.
Okay, that makes sense. All right, I'm going
Yeah.
to, this is your last opportunity for any questions, comments, suggestions, um, things you're not
You
clear
could tell us
about.
your topic. You could tell us your topic and what you're working on.
Doctor, could you also kindly help me with the research design? Like you helped my colleague Petulo with the quasi experiment, looking
Okay.
at my research design will entail for the GDP and employment relationship.
What is your topic?
The topic is
Data sense.
assessing the relationship between GDP growth and unemployment in South Africa and industry analysis. So I'm looking at that relationship, but I'm disaggregating it by industry. For example, how does how does GDP growth affect trade industry in South Africa?
How does GDP growth affect trade industry in South Africa? How are you defining growth, GDP growth? Let's begin from there.
Okay, I am using the GDP numbers that are published monthly for South Africa, GDP growth numbers.
And how do you define trade at industry level?
Sorry?
How do you define trade how are you measuring trade at industry level? And which industries
Okay,
are we talking about?
okay, initially, okay, I'm looking at industries that South Africa publishes on. It's about 10 industries. We've got agriculture, construction, manufacturing. There are 10. So GDP also publishes GDP growth rate according to these industries. So initially, I wanted to look at how does these numbers, GDP numbers, affect unemployment in each industry. But now we do not have unemployment numbers by industry. That is done by Statistics South Africa. They only collect employment numbers. So I'm going to use employment numbers as a proxy to unemployment.
You're going to use unemployment at the industry level?
I'm going going to use employment numbers because there is no unemployment by industry. So I'm going to use employment numbers as a proxy to unemployment by industry.
By industry. Have you collected data already?
Yes, the data is there. It's collected by Statistics South Africa, Doctor.
Okay. So there are a number of research designs you could consider. Because any research design you choose at the end of the day will depend on how you are going to back it up. So I would recommend that you look at correlational research or causal comparative research design, and you can also look at the quasi experimental research design. And
okay,
your study is going to be more of a retrospective study. So you should look at correlational or causal comparative design. But before you consider the research design I've stipulated, I advise you to read and follow the process I said. Read each research design and ask yourself, does this fit within my study? If it fits, then you tick it. If it doesn't fit, you reject it. That is how you learn. But I can tell you ahead of time that you should look at correlational or causal comparative research design. Then, since you are it's a learning curve, I'll advise you to gradually read all the available research design and tick or reject gradually. That's how you internalize the knowledge so that it becomes a part of you.
Okay, Doctor, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Dr. Berry. All
Thank you.
right. Are there any other questions or comments? Is everybody clear on the material that was covered today?
Yes. May I please ask for the presentation?
Yes. So the presentation slides and the recording will be uploaded on Moodle and RCDMS by the end of the week. So you will have access to both, and you can review in your own time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. And may I also advise that as you will be looking at the presentation slide, remember I prepared it for myself. And there are things there that I just mentioned because I knew I'm going to talk about them. So just have an open mind that it may not be, you will have the presentation, the slides, but I doubt if it's really going to be of help to you. I will advise you to adhere more to the recording. The recording will be of greater help because of the explanations I give. There are points I was just jotting because I know I'm going to, build it up. The slide is not as detailed as a typical classroom slide. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I wanted to
Yes.
find out, are we able
Sorry, I
after the
didn't hear you.
session, or it was just for the session? Are we able to
Nosipo?
have access to the doctor? Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now. Dr. Berry, Nozipo is asking if she's able to contact you.
Um, if I don't have a problem with any student contacting me if the university allows. So, Gabriel?
Nozipo, I think you
Doc-
would have to check with your supervisor first.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, I
Okay.
think
All
Yeah,
you
I
right.
need to
I
get an
don't.
approval.
Yes, on my own, I don't have a problem with a student contacting me. I just need to ensure from Gabriel that there is that direct contact that can be initiated between myself and the student because I was
Oh,
invited to present.
okay.
Yeah. If it is
Okay, thank you.
permittable, then I don't have a problem. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Petolo, you can go ahead.
I don't know, but I think maybe Nozipo was talking from a point of maybe advice, because I think
Oh,
Dr. Berry does give a critical or constructive criticism. So
oh,
just
I
to
see.
say maybe I'm on the right path or what's happening and what's not. Yeah.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah. It's
Doc,
Yes, it is exactly like that. Thank you, Petulo. Yes.
all right, Dr. Berry, would you mind typing your email maybe in the chat box and then people
sure.
can email you?
Chat box.
Yeah.
So that's my email, parfaiberry@gmail.com.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Nozipo, are you sorted?
Yes, thank you so much. It was just for advice.
Sure, sure.
Thank you. Yeah, sure.
No worries.
So, no
Uh,
worries.
all
Any
right.
other person? You want to talk about your topic? Any person? Any student?
Okay.
Okay.
All right. So in the absence of questions, I'm going to bring this workshop to a close. I just want to thank everybody for their time and, for your effort in attending and participating and really using the tools that RCD has arranged for postgraduate students. Dr. Berry, we just want to let you know that we appreciate you for your efforts and also supporting the RCD unit. We hope to see you in the future, maybe facilitating other workshops, but I think you will let us know about your availability. And as for
Thank you.
the attendees, we also want to see you in future workshops because this is for you and to help with your postgraduate journey. So with that, I just want to say everybody to have a good afternoon further. Kindly fill in the feedback survey that I've posted in the chat. Don't forget about that. And have a lovely afternoon and see you soon.
Okay. Bye bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Bye.